commission meeting last night because there was progress made. I don't know if it's not up to me to say if it was in the right direction or not, Commissioner, but there was progress made. You guys voted on the expansion that the Embassy Hotel wanted. I want to first start off by saying this. You're a guy who always stresses the importance of showing up to the meeting when you want something to get done in local government. And I got to say, when I turned on the meeting, because I was watching from home, and when I turned on the meeting last night, there were only 7 people watching on YouTube, by the way, there was nobody who showed up really in opposition to the Embassy Suites last night.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Like you said, I'm a big believer. Is I want the public input. I received one email. That was it, in opposition for it.
One email. Wow, that's
one email.
Surprising.
And the thing about it, Pete, is that the gorilla in the room is that through our legal system, and remember, I'm only representing myself tonight. I'm not talking for the commission. I'm speaking as Commissioner Rumrell, not as anybody else or the city.
Right.
But speaking with legal, unfortunately, our codes are absolutely dated. And I feel that we need to go back and just redo a lot of our codes. They redid some of them after the embassy came through the first time.
Right.
And now I think it's time to look again to tighten up some of the codes that need to be tightened up. And, I was appointed in April of last year, so I haven't even been on the commission a whole year. I'm a lifetime Floridian, born and raised in this area, and, family, multi-generational Floridian. And, I'm a St. Augustine Beach guy. I want to keep St. Augustine Beach, but I can't in the effort of using taxpayers' dollars to fight a lawsuit that I know from our legal side we would lose.
So let me go back. Because I was watching a little bit of the commission last night. You and I spoke a little bit earlier today just about this and about coming on the show. And so you guys, from what I understand, you guys checked with the city attorney, and the city attorney pretty much said, look, this is really our only route. We don't have, if we go any other way, we're going to get sued and we'll probably lose.
Correct. And so at that point, your hands are tied because we are stewards of taxpayer dollars. That's the utmost and most important thing as a commissioner that we do is make sure that the money we receive from taxes goes appropriately to the things that need to be done, like infrastructure, sidewalks, things that are of importance, parks, stuff like that. We have little parkettes that I'll get to at some point on the commission where I'd like to beef those up and make them welcoming. But we have things that we have to do. We need stuff for our public works department. They need a new building. There's a lot of projects that we need, and to cut a check to an attorney who's a very good attorney, Mr. Wilson, it's hard to fight a battle knowing that I'm just writing a check that we're going to have to not only pay him, but we're going to have to pay legal fees to the prevailing party on top of that. So I'd rather save our money, Pete, and use it for the things that really need to be done in the city of St. Augustine. And again, our codes need to be looked at. The problem lies within the code. Not lies within the commission or staff, it lies within the code.
Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit about the code, too, because when this embassy was first built, am I correct in that the code when this embassy was first built said that you had to have, at least for this property, you had to have 1.5 parking spaces for each hotel room? Is that what it was?
1.15.
1.15. Just a ridiculous, crazy, stupid number.
Well, not only that, Pete, but they didn't take into account the meeting space. They didn't take into account the restaurant space. The city asked the white who have the Santa Maria who are fighting over chairs because of the impact fees of what it costs to add chairs to a restaurant.
Yeah.
So imagine we had nothing in place. Now that's been changed. We've changed. Before I got on the board, they realized, they changed the code to now require more space, more parking and stuff for added space like meeting spaces and restaurants and stuff like that. So that part has been taken care of.
So then and I'm sorry to cut you off there, Commissioner, as far as the code that was in place before, does this expansion have to follow an updated code? Are they held to a higher standard with the expansion, or are they still kind of grandfathered into that 1.1, or is that 1.1 still in the code currently?
Well, so the 1.1, and that's what we have to look at. That's currently still in the code.
Okay.
And so if they
that's
were to
garbage. That's terrible. That makes no sense.
And it's a calculation, Pete, that from what I've understood is a national calculation is what they do, because they don't look at, a lot of places have different rules for banquet halls, meeting spaces, and restaurants. So if they were adding banquet hall or an additional restaurant, then the code would be different for them. But because it's just hotel rooms, the 1.15 still applies.
Okay, so that doesn't count in the spaces that are already in existence. Everything that's already in existence, that's done for, there's no change in it. We can't compensate for that. And they're still held by that 1.5. So that's, parking is a big concern. Parking is a big concern with this across the board because, we saw at the beginning the embassy said they were not going to encroach on pier parking. We've seen them encroaching on pier parking as well as other places kind of in that area. There's kind of nowhere else to park, unfortunately, except for that pier area. What are we looking at as far as parking for this expansion? And then kind of an offshoot of that, while construction is going on, what about parking for all of these service vehicles that are going to be working on this new building, this massive building? I have to imagine we're going to have a ton of vehicles, guys who need to park to work on this thing.
Well, and that was part of the development order that we came up with, that they are not to park in the pier parking lot and they're not to park on Pope Road. Because to me, the biggest problem, and I wasn't a commissioner,
right,
but what I saw from being at the beach was that they were parking construction vehicles on Pope Road and into the pier parking lot. And so that was part of the deal that we made with them last night, one of the conditions, I guess, that says that, look, there's certain areas that you can park and areas that you can't park. They've got to work for an off-site parking to handle what they have to do. Also, all materials and stuff for the building side of things has to be on property. That's part of our code to begin with. So anything that they're doing for expansion, whether it be trusses and stuff like that, they have to be held on property. They can't be held out of property. And so, we're trying to protect the residents in the sense of, we don't want another Michler's or Michler's Beach access point where they were, blocked it off, and that was not good. That cost, I think, Mr. Wanchek his job. And so we're trying to avoid that problem where the beach access is less disrupted. And by doing so, by adding it into one of our conditions for the parking, I think that should help take care of that side of it. Because, again, that's for our residents and visitors to park in, and it should be.
Yeah, and I don't know what enforcement necessarily looks on that. I don't know how it's kind of built in for you guys to enforce it, but I know, the Embassy Suites really, I know you guys have mentioned before that you want to be welcoming to everybody who wants to be part of our community, and I understand that. I agree with that as well. I think they have to realize at the Embassy Suites that, they're already treading on thin ice because the way this project was handled in the beginning, again, before you were a commissioner, just really rubbed people the wrong way. And for that reason alone, a lot of people on principle are just against any expansion, any more that we have to deal with this place. So I think it would be wise of them to at least try to help enforce that if they possibly can. What do you think they need to do? Because like I said, we want to have them be good community partners. They're here forever. They're not going anywhere. So, and as far as I know, the owner, I've met him, nice guy. I know they try to do a lot in the community. What do you think they need to do, at least for their public image, to show folks in the community, hey, we want to be good community partners here with you. We're in it for the long haul, but we're also in it for you.
And that was the first thing I said last night, Pete, when I talked to both the applicant and the attorney. So we had our building director, Mr. Law, present it, which that's the protocol. The building director presents the stuff, and then the applicant comes up thereafter for questions. And my first thing to them, Pete, is that as a resident, forget being a commissioner, but as a resident, they should have had the doors open with renderings and things like that for people of the community to come and see and have that dialogue. They should be reaching out to the people. It's not up to me to talk about the Embassy Suites. It's about the Embassy Suites to talk about the Embassy Suites.
Yeah.
So I think their public relations side of things, they got to tighten up, man. And that was one of the things that I hammered home last night, that it is what it is, right? If you're going to be a steward, it's great to do events. It's great to do certain things in the community. And everybody's appreciative for any business that gives back in St. Augustine. We're all are appreciative of
that. But,
however,
but to point out, as the mayor pointed out, when they were announced as the sponsor of the beach blast-off, I think it got a rousing boo from the crowd.
It did.
Yeah.
And it's because that image, because, look, they've sued the city.
Yeah.
They fought the city.
Yeah.
And so let's let some of that stuff pass. Let that pass, and then truly become a community partner. Because I think any business to thrive in any location is to have the buy-in of the locals. I don't care what people say. Well, they're busy all the time. We're at 90%, but that's great. But at some point, the newness will wear off, and they're going to need the local support.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in order to do that, build that rapport now, and then continue to let that grow. And I think long term, I hope they become a better steward. And that was my point to last night. But again, our codes, Pete, they just have to be looked at, and they need to be checked out. And that's going to be my plan for 2020, is to really dig into these codes and make sure that we don't have another problem like this happen.
Yeah, and I know you said earlier to me, I don't ever want to see another Embassy Suites debacle like this ever again. When is the next opportunity to look at some of these codes and look at revising them and updating them for 2020 in St. Augustine? Because it's tough for us to go by a national average. It's tough for us to just say, hey, this is what works across the rest of the country, so let's let it work for us here. Because St. Augustine and St. Augustine Beach is just a completely different place from so many places in the country. So when does that start looking at the codes?
Well, my thing is that we still have a continuation meeting on Monday, and then probably carry into Tuesday. We have interviews for new attorney and stuff like that coming up on Monday, and then we'll start a regular scheduled meeting from last night. The continuation of that will start after that, which then will probably end up going Tuesday, probably a couple hours. But in commissioner comments, I'm going to bring that up. That's what I've heard from the residents, is that, hey, if they're allowed to do it, what do we need to do from stopping them to be allowed to do it? And again, it all falls into the code.
Yeah.
And remember, I'm only one of 5, so whatever I do, I hope that we can get that taken care of as a group. Because I really believe, Pete, we have a very, very strong, hard-working commission. I think everybody's doing their homework. I think everybody is working hard to make the beach better. And so I think, again, I'm only one of 5, but I feel that I think, from my perspective, I've heard it. And so if I'm hearing it, I'm assuming all the other commissioners have heard it too, is, hey, let's make this place a great place and continue to build on the atmosphere that we have of a family-friendly, enjoyable place, and not, make it more of an inconvenience to residents like myself.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with that. Just to kind of recap last night's vote, it was a 4-1 vote for that expansion. And pretty much what I'm hearing from you is that, and I watched some of the meeting as well, and I can attest to this. All of you guys who voted for this did raise serious questions. You asked the city attorney multiple times, are we clear to do this? Are they clear to do this? Is this, do we have a route to kind of contest this at all? And basically the answer from the city attorney was, this is really the only option we've got. Option B automatically gets us sued. So that's what was the reason for your vote and most of other commissioners' votes, was because there just wasn't any other out on this one, unfortunately, at this time.
Well, I think Vice Mayor Koska, which, both her and Mayor England got installed last night as Vice Mayor and Mayor, but I think Vice Mayor Koska said it beautifully. I reluctantly vote yes for this.
Yeah.
Because she knows, just like everybody else, that we were pigeonholed.
Yeah.
If we all voted no, we would be sitting there. Front page of the Record on Monday would be another lawsuit filed against the city. I can guarantee it.
Yeah. And, just another reminder, and Commissioner, thank you again for taking some time to talk with me here tonight. I always appreciate you coming on my show. But just a reminder to everybody, get involved when conversations come up about these codes, because, if you don't, then you can't sit there and complain in 4 years when the commissioners have to vote along with the codes that you had a chance to have some input on.
And I tell people, Pete, my phone number is out there. Please call me. My email's out there. Please, I will sit with you. I will meet with you. I return all phone calls. Actually, it's one of the things that people tell me. They're surprised I call them back because in the past they haven't had that. And I will go and I will walk your street with you. You tell me what's the problem, I will walk the street with you because I'm here to try to help find the solution because I'm put into this position from the people, and that's my duties is to be with them.
Yeah, and definitely appreciate it. I know you've always been, flexible enough to come on my show whenever I've been able to ask you, unless you had something really pressing. But I appreciate the accessibility, and I do want to let people know I can vouch for that. He is a guy that you can reach fairly easily. And again, Commissioner Rumrell, I do appreciate your time coming on the show as always. And have a great rest of the night. I'm looking forward to talking to you again soon.
Likewise. Thanks, Pete.
You got it.